Hello, good morning. Como é que sou? O som está ligado?
Eles têm que abrir o microfone deles.
Okay, let's start. Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to you all, to our participants. Welcome to Lisbon and to our meeting here. Good morning, and or good afternoon for our friends online. We have some of the participants and some people from our working group here online, and also good morning for those who could be seeing us by the YouTube channel. Well, my name is Paulo Pinto and I'm a researcher at CHAM. I would like to once again give you welcome on behalf of my center and also on behalf of the other organizers of this meeting. Namely, this is a joint activity from CHAM and from École Française d'Aix-Montréal with Paula Calanca and Luca Gagliani, and most importantly by FRAMESPA, Université Jean Jaurès, Université de Toulouse, Professor Guillaume Godin, who is here with us, and I will soon give him the word to give some more information about this. I would like just those who are online, just see if the sound conditions are good, and also the image. We can test here. We have Wei Chung and Birgit and Harriet and Alexander. Okay. Ubaldo is also, and Mark Dizon from Manila. This just give you, for those who could not be exactly aware of how did this happen here, this workshop called Different Sources for a Common History of Southeast and East Asia, Communities, Mobilities and Environment. Well, this was an activity, some sort in a continuity, a second step of a seminar that took place last year in Toulouse, a seminar called Communauté, Accommodation et Violence aux Philippines et dans sa région. And then we decided to just not stop and try to make something further. And so this is a second seminar, a second encounter workshop from this working group. It's an international network we are creating with some of the colleagues here present. I would like then to give some information about technical aspects of these sessions. We will have 5 sessions, working sessions. The final one will be reserved for the working group tomorrow in the afternoon. And just to say that in this group, the official languages are English, French, and Spanish. So Portuguese is not accepted, unfortunately, but we hope that in a future time we could, give our contribution. Well, but if someone participating in this debate would have any question in Portuguese, we can try to solve, of course, this problem. We decided we will make some adjustments on the program. The program is a little bit flexible about this. I just put half an hour for each one of the participations and papers. We'll have a more relaxed morning because we have more time today. The afternoon will be a little bit more tight. We made a little change on the schedule in the morning. So we will, after this introduction, we will have the presentation by Professor Wei Chang from Taipei, then Professor Hayes Foster, and then immediately the discussion, question and answer and debate without the break. So probably we will stop a little bit sooner than was expected in the program. I don't know if we have a wonderful technical camera here. So the person who will make the speech will stay here, and then we will just turn this for the questions. So don't be surprised if you see this turning well. This is completely automatic, as you can see. Okay. So you just, I don't know if Luca or Paula from FAO would like to say something. If not, I will give the word to Guillaume. Guillaume, would you like to come here, or would you like to speak from there? Yeah, or just for him to give the whole context of what is going on in our project. Then I will be back here to introduce our first guest. Guillaume.
Thank you. Obrigado. C'est bien dit. Le mot que je sais bien dire. Hello, guten Tag. Bon dia. Bon dia. Well, yes. Good morning. I'm very happy to be here and to see all those people at the distance. I'm here in Lisboa because this meeting is the result of the first seminar 1 year ago, and meeting in June when we decided to apply for funding in France for a project with titled Communities, Mobilities and Environment around the East Asian Seas for the 17th century, a large 17th century. The good news is that we succeed in this funding in Toulouse, and now we are working to include more academic institutions with the École Française d'Extrême-Orient, la Casa de Velázquez, and other universities, your universities or academic institutions. This project is based on personal and simple observation. Historians specializing in societies located between East Asia, Southeast Asia, the Pacific Ocean, the Indian Ocean, work on similar objects, but could collaborate more, I think. There is a tradition of collaboration, an ancient one. I could cite the work of Denis Lombard, for example, or Thierry Manguin, who cannot be here today, unfortunately. I don't know if you say that in English. Léonard Blusset, Anthony Reid, etc., etc. We have also in our team researchers like Birgit Kremle or Ubaldo Iacarino, who works both on the Asian societies and European societies in Asia, or Wei Sheng also. So the idea is not to do something totally new, but to try to work together, to build a team and work on these topics centered on communities, no? Communities, mobilities, and if possible, ecology question of environment. For the today meeting, the idea was to start from the beginning with the sources, with the idea that we have different specialists and sometimes we don't know each other, the sources we use to study the same topics. We will see that today. I think there is a lot of question about language, Spanish, English, comment on dit hollandais, Dutch, Chinese, Japanese, Cambodian, etc., etc. Portuguese, but I can't pronounce the name, so I don't do it. Portuguese, French. I think there is some French sources for the voyages of the 17th, 18th centuries, no? Et le Suisse, Switzerland, je sais comment il s'appelle le Suisse. Voilà. So we have a lot of languages. We don't speak all those languages, and I think there is moments that we could help each other and to understand this different kind of sources. Like for me, I don't understand very well what are gazetteers, Chinese gazetteers, local gazetteers in China. So I would be glad to understand that, for example. So that's the idea, and I thank you. I thanks very much, Paolo, for all the organization here. It is a model for us, I think, and Miguel also, Rodriguez Lorenzo, who assist Paolo in this great organization. That's all. Thank you. We can start.
Thank you. Please keep your expectations low about logistics and all of this. Okay, so let's start. We're today and tomorrow. Well, this is basically a workshop about sources and about different sources, and so the different panels try to mix and to cross the different sources for this common history of Southeast and East Asia. Okay. So let's start with Professor Wei-Chung Cheng from Taipei. Welcome. I don't know what time is it there, but I think there is some 7 or 8 hours of difference. Please open your microphone to see if our sound here is working. Okay, just yes, your microphone is open. Do the other people online listen to what Wei-Chung is saying now? Birgit?
What do you mean?
Birgit, please, could someone, other people online say something? Birgit,
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but we can listen to Wei-Chung. So I think the problem should be from there, from the origin.
Should look into the sound settings. See.
Now do you hear the voice?
Okay.
I've changed to I shift a different microphone. Maybe
Yes,
I just cancel the
try to put
okay.
the
And I would like to share my screen. So yeah, let's try whether I could start this PowerPoint.
I think you are allowed to share your screen. Yeah.
Okay, to do it. Is it work?
Yeah.
Okay, so everything. Okay, so voice is okay, and also the screen is okay, right? Got it? Okay. Okay, I'm very glad to participate in this workshop. I thank for the Professor Gauding and Professor Kalanka to invite me to do this presentation. And also some of you, like Ubato, he might have already learned about this when he stayed in Taiwan, but most of you may not know about this information. So what I'm going to tell is about a new source just emerged on several years, and I'm currently handle these sources. Well, yeah. So before that, I think maybe not everyone here is familiar with the history of Taiwan. So I shall firstly explain the establishment of the India, which is a Sino-Dutch city. So we know in the 16th century that Portuguese come to Malaccas, and Swedes also have made a settlement in 1571, and in China also there implement policies that allowed all the Hokkien people to go abroad to do their business. So the Chinese vessels go along the west road and east sea road, and to visit different places. And also at this time that Japan and China was at odds. They are enemy to each other. They cannot trade each other. So this Portuguese later also obtained a status in Macau. So the Portuguese could send their vessels to trade directly with Japan. And this is quite important because that was the time there's maybe the first global silver circulation around the world. And most of the silvers carrying from Atlantic then to China from by this Indian Ocean road. But also part of them will go directly via Pacific Ocean to Manila. So from Manila, there are silvers flow into China. And also apart from the South America, there's also 1/3 of silver in the world produced in Japan. So therefore, there's a huge attraction between China and Japan to trade and exchange commodities. But they are enemies, they could not do the trade directly to each other. So the Japanese send their official vessels, the Koshoin Sen, to Southeast Asia. And the Chinese, just as I had mentioned earlier, they also allow their vessels to go Southeast Asia. So they can have exchange. They can exchange their commodities at the third places, then mostly in Manila and also in Cochinchina. Then this is called transit trade. And so in the end of the 16th century, there's a very huge amount of trade concerning related to this silver flow in these third places, Manila and in Cochinchina and somewhere else in the Southeast Asia. Well, then Taiwan is not upon this map. Taiwan is not within this trading system. This trading system used to work very well, smooth until the Dutch. Well, there's a war in Europe. The Dutch was against the Spaniards and trying to pursue its independent status. And in Southeast Asia, they found that the way to defeat the Spaniards is to blockade Manila. So from 1610, then gradually the Dutch push forward to this already established Iberian trading system. Well, then, so they cut. Well, they were too weak to go against the Iberian directly, so they cut off the Chinese. They cut off the Chinese vessels visiting Cochinchina and Manila. This really caused a lot of trouble for the Chinese people, and not even to mention they also try to cut off this Portuguese ships to from Macau to Nagasaki. So Then the Chinese merchants in Southeast Asia and in China and in Japan, they thought about one solution to make a detour and avoid the aggression of the Dutch. That is, they found a way to go to Taiwan. And in Taiwan, they could do some smuggling trade, a transit trade. This is some place that never been known before. Okay, so then we comes to this Taiwan. This is Taiwan nowadays. And in 17th century map, we put it horizontally. So this is Taiwan, and nearby this is the Pescador Islands, and this is Taiwan Harbor. That's what we are going to be focused today. So 1622, the Dutch sent a big fleet, tried to snatch Macau, but they were defeated by the local garrison. Then they shifted their go to Pescadores, trying to negotiate trade with China. But then after 2 years, the Chinese also sent a very big militant troops. They use the military forces and driven the Dutch away. Then the Dutch have to accept to stay in this place, Taiwan, and to establish a trading post. So that's it in the 17th century Dutch map. Just tallied correspond with this modern map, then you will see it here. But nowadays, the coastal environment is totally different of what was there in 17th century, because in 17th century, there used to be a very wide, shallow lagoon, and also the offshore sandbank along this southwest coast of Taiwan. So that's very different from what we have in Taiwan now. And so the same place, we have a larger chart. So you can see here is a lagoon, and this is an offshore sandbank. And upon the sandbank, the Dutch built is a trading post, because, well, when there's a tide up and tide down, there were flows went out and went in, and gradually this spot is digging into a very deep a very deep shape, and it's very useful as an anchorage for the 17th century vessels. In the sandbank, the sand will accumulate when the season wind changes, so it also could prevent the wind go against directly upon the vessels. So enlarge it, then you can see here is the anchorage. Then here is the Dutch fort, because the Dutch want to control the anchorage with their cannons. And they also use this place. This original meaning was to trade with the Chinese. So there is a settlement for the traveling merchants to stay. So this is Strandia town. Okay, that's a brief introduction about where the Strandia town is and how it was formed, and a general background. I think most of you should have already knew about that, just in case. So let's talk about these yesterday registers. Okay, the registers is discovered by this guy, Menno Lenstra, who is a amateur historian. His profession is not a historian, but he spent a lot of time in the archives during some summer or winter vacation, when he was off from his profession. He's a sailor, is a guy who is training young childs to sail the boat. So he's personally very interested about this Dutch East India archives, and he tried to figure out some 17th century persons, their biologies and their biographical records, what stories behind them, but somehow he come across these pieces. So I will explain later why these sources is not listed within the Dutch East India Company's archives, but in somewhere else in the notary's archives. And that's what happened since these sources discovered. So about 2015, then Menard, he discovered these estate registers. So he informed several real professional scholars he knew. That's Leonard Broussais, who is really expert for the East Asian histories, and also Tonio Andrade in US. He is also an expert for Taiwan history. Then I think most of them really doesn't have time to deal with this raw material. So they all informed me to see whether I could, at least to see how to use this resource, and eventually maybe we should make it a publication, maybe it published, so more people could use it. So I applied the project, applied some funds, and in 2018 we make a first workshop and press conference to tell the world that we have these sources. And 2019, then I have a second workshop. I think the Ubata was there at the time. So to explain what has been discovered basing on this piece of information. And to the 2019 December, suddenly this epidemic exploded. So, well, in these 2 years, I just set it aside because I was assigned to other missions. But my colleague who works as an architect, he make a three-dimensional recover video. And well, we talk about it later. If we have also spare time, we could go back to check those YouTube clips. So now it's 2022 and following year that I'm going, try to also sort it out, the sources, and try to make it publish. So let's talk about the source itself. Well, it is accidentally preserved, not in the company's archives, but in a notary's archives in Amsterdam. Therefore, it is preserved in Amsterdam's the city halls, the civil archives. And how come this could happen? Well, it goes back to its original author. Its original author was hired in Taiwan, and in 1643, this guy, Nicasius de Hoogh, then was ordered by his superior to make a survey of all the house lots in the settlement, in the town. And he did that. And this suppose and 4 years later, he went back to Holland with his family, his wife, and the 4-year son. And he didn't make it. He passed away on the road. And his wife also passed away. So only the child, the 4-year son, Anthony de Hoogh, was able to land it in Holland safe and sound. at the time he was entrusted into two guardians. One is Romain de Hoogh, that's his uncle, and the other is Sebastien van Peert. He is a very famous notary in Amsterdam. And because of all of those inherited documents of Nicasius de Hoogh fall into the hands of Sebastien van Peert. And in the 17th century, the notaries really took care, lots of business, well, especially those paintings in the Dutch Golden Ages, like paintings from Rembrandt, paintings from other very famous painters. They were trading via these notaries, and therefore the archive of notaries were preserved, relatively completed. And what was happened was Van de Peert, following the habit at the time, he recycled all those papers belongs to Nicasius de Hoogh. So Nicasius de Hoogh left this document, this land register, as a heritage to his son, but notaries also taking care of them, and he found this document has a lot of blanket pages. And at the time, he used the blanket pages to do his own business and put it a new layer. So later, when the notary's archive is completely preserved, so this original layer of the record made by Nicasius de Hoogh also remain in the notary's archive. And the guy I mentioned, Menno Lenstra, he just, well, in order, he had some interest to see the information of Sebastien van Peert, and he found that something very weird upon this notebook. It got two layers, and nobody really taking care, nobody really look into this original layer and don't know what, and doesn't care what it is. But he looked into that and he found that was the land register of the Zeelandia. So that's so it is in the Amsterdam City Archives, and this is a current inventories number. And this is the document. So you can see everything here is used by the notary Sebastien van Peert. So he used it to note his business with his client. And once it's no use, then you will close it. And somewhere here in the blanket, you could find something. It's an upside down writing. What you see here is folio 169, but he put it upside down here. Here is the number 169. It's upside down. Then you will look into the original layer here, original layer, and you enlarge the original layer. Then suddenly you see a title of this original document. Well, that is the house and the property that's on this Taiwan and Zeelandia town, which was ordered by the governor of Taiwan to this Nicasius de Hoogh to make a registration. So then the whole volume would be 140 pages. And we got eventually 395 entries. So each entry is one house lot. And we put it into the computer database. It would look like this. Like here is a block A, and the house number from 1, 2, 3, 4, then upon it's a front door upon which street. So that's street name, front door upon which street, and how long, how wide the lot is, how long the house lot is, and most importantly, who is registered as its owner. So that's about this 300 house lot. So I cooperate with my colleague who works in the architect. So they make this drawing, and also compared with the actually they compare with the foundation with houses today, and to look whether it is possible to put this register information into a spatial form. So they do as possibly as they could to try to recover what it looked like before in the 17th century. So there comes the results. That is a picture recovered from this register for about 300 houses, and with the streets, we compare also with other documents to see how its original looks like, and he also send a team to measure what's left today in Tainan city at the same spot, and some of this foundation might have still under the ground and fit with this recovery picture, a recovery chart or recovery map. So here is the town, and here's a fortress, and we still have the remaining one wall of the Dutch fort. And nowadays is a park that everybody could purchase a ticket and look around the remainings. So that's the whole thing looks like. Now, if we then change the direction, then you could compare with also the 17th century map drawn by a German soldier who is a kind of profession in measure in land survey. So it is correspond to each other very tight. So let's talk about the Chinese citizens. So we would put one of a sample, one sample of the documents. So you can, so that is the original layer, and with the information of the house lot. So this is a Guanko in Chinese, Peiko in Chinese, Taikan in Chinese, Sanko in Chinese, and this Jakting. So it's not quite sure whether it's a Chinese or it's from the other ethnic. But anyhow, there are a lot of names, a lot of house owners. We could be sure that he is his ethnicity is ethically a Chinese. So we go back to this 300 house lot, and then you will see this pink color is the house lot registered as a for the Chinese people. So this is all for the Chinese, at least his owner is a Chinese. And for this light blue, those are residents of the Dutch people, or at least it is owned by the Dutch people. And the green part is not quite sure, not quite certain. And this yellow is something belongs to the company. So you can have a rough idea of how at the time the people living in the town, and mostly the Dutch people, is more they live more close to the fort and far from the harbor, and the Chinese living just upon the harbor and also very close to the ferry to the main island of Formosa, Taiwan. So there were about 105 Chinese, although they have 300 houses, but not all the houses is owned by a person. So there were about 104 Chinese names. And I try to identify who they are. I use those names and cross-check with the diary of Council of Zandia. And there are also there are 5 persons not mentioned in the published sources, but in unpublished sources. So in unpublished sources, I come across several 302 Chinese names. It's not related to. It is from my personal documents. I also have some Chinese listed scattered at all different kind of company sources. In my database, is only 26 names overlapping with this town register. So together, there are only 31 names. We have a little more information than their names and their house number or their house lot. So here is the 31 person that I could identify and look into their stories a little more than just one name. The other names, the other 70 names, we have only names, but we really don't know who they are. And we're trying to identify who they are, but I still couldn't get more information about it. But for those 31 persons, then we could have some very rough idea of those about the activities or about this lifestyles or about their business or about who they are. So what might be most related or most interest for this workshop is that some of those Chinese citizens, they proceed their own business. So they did their trade in Southeast Asia or in East Asian seas. And it seems to me the most popular harbor they visit is somewhere in Cambodia. And Cambodia is the most popular destination of their zones. And also Queen Nan, both of them upon the Cochinchina. And but we know that if they mention if they report to the Dutch authorities that they were planning to go Cambodia and Queen Nan, they might end up not only visit Cambodia and Queen Nan, because if they went further south, they could obtain more valuable commodities. So probably they go further south to those Malay regions like Patani, or even to Batavia. And sometimes they also went to Japan or Manila. But those two places, Manila and Nagasaki, it is supposed to be prevented, is forbidden by the Dutch authorities. So they won't tell in their report. Well, also in this town, in this town in Zambia, in Taiwan, I think the lingua franca is either Portuguese or Spanish. That's Iberian language, because at the time the Iberian has already settled down in East Asia for at least 70 years, 80 years. So most of the Chinese businessmen, if they would be able to deal with foreign merchants, they speak either Portuguese or Spanish or maybe Japanese. Also, this is a tally with the earlier I mentioned about this development of the transit trade, the trade in the third place for the Chinese and Japanese businessmen. So okay, yeah, then also that they might have their, I think most of the citizens they must have a background related to these Iberian cities in Macau and Manila, and probably because the emerge of Taiwan and the citizens living in Macau and Manila, they send their agents to Taiwan and to see whether they could obtain a better business here. So this is what I am now investigating and couldn't get much improving. It's an argument. So one thing is very also important is that they have a direct connection with Batavia as well. It is because from the beginning, when the Dutch settle, in Taiwan, settle down in Taiwan, they decide to do the business with volcanoes in China, and most of people they could consult with is the first group of the Chinese citizens in Batavia, in Jakarta at the time. So those people, they become a middleman between the Dutch and the Chinese in Taiwan. So they also send their agent to Taiwan to help the Dutch to facilitate this trade between the Dutch and the Chinese. And sometimes you could see from the Dutch archives that the Dutch East India Company even dispatch their vessel to carry the Chinese citizens from Taiwan to travel to Batavia and vice versa. So in 42, there are 55 persons on board in the Dutch vessels and sailed to Batavia. And to the later period, the Dutch saying it is not a good idea to allow the Chinese citizen to develop more their own business in Zambia town. So they try to persuade them that every this kind of traffic, they can go via the Dutch vessels, and also some maybe there's privileged vessels to go directly to Batavia. So there are kind of links of the junk trade directly between Zambia and Batavia, between those between those Chinese citizens, between the Capitan in Batavia, and the citizens, maybe just the agent in Taiwan. Or this maybe so there were in the frequency of several years there will be traffic between two places to exchange all these daily groceries and errands. Well, then, because the Dutch doesn't want those people to involve more to this overseas business for their own pocket, they encourage those people to do the land development, to make a cultivation in the main island of Taiwan, the Formosa, and also encourage them because their language skills, they could be the middleman between the Dutch and the Aborigine peoples. So they use the kind of a mechanism of tax forms, and they could therefore collect the deer skins and other resources from the Aborigines via the tax farmers. That's mostly those citizens in Zealandia. Well, then in those 2 years, just after this explode of epidemic, I still did some efforts try to identify those peoples using the Chinese sources, because in China, they were very keen to persuade the Taiwanese people that each of the Taiwanese people have their roots in China. So they make a huge volume of genealogy collections, and with these several thousand people's names in that. So I also try to using this kind of information to identify those 100 and 105 Chinese citizens in the Zealandia town. But also, well, firstly, it's a different language. That's a Chinese, written in Chinese, and in the genealogy records, it also contains very limited information, only the name of this person, his parent, his child, and maybe where he was born and where he eventually passed away. So it is still very difficult to cross-check these two kind of sources, and I spent some time of that and feel very disappointed. So that's it. That's most of the. Yeah. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you. Could you please yes, okay. So let's move to our next guest is Professor Hayes Costa, who's talking about Syed Prang Johor as a work of Malay historiography. Please. Just a second to check your.
Yes, please. Yes. I'm a total, to say in Portuguese, with this kind of stuff. So somebody has to watch me as I talk.
Yes, we all did. Please, is here the folder called Syed Prang Johor?
Sorry?
No. Here is
No. The top paper.
Here?
One. Yes.
Open?
Yes, paper.
Okay. Just a second. Okay, I will give you here. When you would like to share the screen, just tell me and I will share it. Okay. Oh yeah. Sit.
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go.
So how do I start? Because I've never done this.
Do you want to share immediately the
Well, I
PowerPoint?
just like to start now. Go through it.
Yeah. Then just let me know and I will share it. But you can make here compartilhar tela
Yeah.
and just click here on this final paper. Okay.
Okay. Let's go to the final paper.
Okay. How do I?
Yeah.
So
Final paper. Where's the paper now?
wants to share it now?
No, I want to talk.
Please.
Yeah, but where's my text?
I have a text.
I have text, yes. I have text, like the gentleman before.
But where is it?
Here, a PowerPoint presentation, that's what it is.
Okay.
So what they are going to see on their screen is what I'm talking about here. Yeah. So can I just?
So, okay, just pass through this.
That's it. Okay.
But we can share this with the image on it for all people to see.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
That's what I made it for. It will be easier for everybody to follow me.
Yeah. Okay.
Today, and now maybe full screen. For me, it's difficult to use very
Okay.
small letters.
Okay. Just
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, right. Okay, I'll move from here. So let me begin to say that it's not without trepidation that I speak to this august company of professional historians as an outsider, but I hope you will bear with me. And also I apologize for the 7-mile boots with which I have to walk in my presentation, because I just cannot talk about details in 30 minutes. Yeah. Shai Prang Johor, the poem about the wars of Johor, which I tentatively date, and dating a Malay manuscript can be like walking on quicksand. Yeah, I dated provisionally between 1643, by the time the hero of the story is dead, and 1677, when the ruler during which the reign of this all happened also died. As a work of Malay historiography. Oh, what happened to the full screen? Because now, can I get rid? Sorry, I told you I'm a total idiot. Because part of my text is gone. No, I want the full screen. That's it. Elementary, my dear Watson.
Okay.
Right?
Like this.
Okay, that's it. Okay. So Shai Prang Johor may be called a heroic epic in praise of the leadership, and the Malay word for giving leadership to order is perintah, provided by Johor's admiral, the Laksamana, in the battles by its fleet with Aceh, and as allies of the Dutch with Portuguese Malacca in the years 1639 to 1641. It must have been composed between 1643 and 77. The text we have is actually a copy made for a Dutch official in 1844, much later, on the island of Penyengat in the Ria archipelago. There, the Buginese viceroys resided from 1803 until the kingdom of Riau Lingga was abolished by the Dutch, which happened in 1911. The history of the way in which the text came together is rather unusual, because it was cobbled together by the 1844 copyist from a very old and dilapidated manuscript owned by Engku Putri, the widowed queen consort of Sultan Mahmud III, who was the last ruler of the kingdom of Johor, Pahang, and Riau. That sultan died in 1811. As I will show, hopefully, even in its present cobbled together state, the Syai Prang Johor is a well-composed and coherent poem that both reflects as well as interacts with historical reality in an interesting way. So much for the introduction. Then now we go to the geography, because I'm talking Riau, remember? Well, here you have the geography of Riau, and especially this area here that I circled south of Singapore was among the Dutch of those days in the 1630s and 40s, was known as the Broken Islands for clear reasons. Yeah. This is an ideal place for fleets to play hide and seek with each other, and that's that plenty did. Not only the Dutch, but also the Malays, of course. Yeah. And the main place to remember is Bintan here, because this is where the base was established on this island, from which the Malays fought with Aceh and with the Portuguese. I go on now to the Johor River. Here you have a map. This is Singapore here in the south, and here you see the Johor River going inland, quite a distance. And the kingdom of Johor in the 16th, 17th century had several capitals. They say capitals, but actually they are royal residences, yeah, along the Johor River. I go to the manuscript. I am very lucky not to have the very difficult manuscript on which my predecessor was just now talking, because that is difficult to read a palimpsest, yeah? Notarial papers, yeah, written over these old records. So I can only wish him the best of luck with that, because it's very hard. And this is a very neat manuscript, actually. And you can see that the copyist really did his best to give his Dutch patron, who had ordered the manuscript, something that was very nice and good to use. Yeah. I talked about heroic epic. I said that my text was a kind of heroic epic. Well, what do I mean then? The heroic epic is about the kerajaan, that is the kingdom with the Raja, yeah, the kingdom, at war. It tells how, elicited by the king's royal power, the kings were supposed to have a kind of magical power, and that was called daulat, yeah, with an Arabic word, which definitely does not mean magical power, I must say, but it became that, by the king's royal power. And it tells of the kerajaan war, how, elicited by the king's royal power, the quality of his warriors manifests themselves in council and field through their fine words, their noble bearing. Their bearing is extremely important. Yeah, it's like an American cowboy movie. Yeah, the way you will come into a saloon is everything. Yeah. So noble bearing and memorable deeds. Different from the genealogical chronicle, that is the genre of historiography, which is more well known from the Malays, the Sejarah Melayu, for instance, the history of the Malay kings. Yeah. The heroic epic does not argue for legitimacy or authority of an institution. Hell no, it simply assumes these. Yeah. These institutes are there and they are valid, period. Yeah, confirming in as directly as possible a way the religious and socio-political orders, that is Islam and the Kerajaan order. If I say it in, there are many French people here, I should read it in French. Actually, what is it, chrétien? Nee, how is it? Païen on tort, yeah, et chrétien on droit. Great, yeah, in old French, yeah. The heroic epic strives to tell a success story. Authors want to tell a success story, and if there is a defeat, a big defeat, it's a big problem for the author. Yeah. They strive to tell a success story of courage for a just cause, duly rewarded. And that epic is built by stringing along its stories, its perkataan in Malay, in a non-causality driven way. You pile up story on story on story, and the causality has to be searched for, of course, by the audience. Yeah. These are motivated, these stories, by the uttering of public promises. And here I go again to the French heroic epic, the Gab, yeah, Portuguese gabar, I think. Yeah. The gap is very important. Yeah. The public promises by the warriors, failure to perform what one has published in public, but also, for instance, treason is punished by poetic justice. Yeah, because then the writer will get you somewhere in the story. Yeah, and let you suffer a terrible fate. A Malay definition of the genre of the heroic epic is the following one, which I take from an admittedly late text, namely one which dates to the 1810s, and which is about a Kedah fleet. A Kedah is a northern Malay state that assisted the Siamese against the Burmese. And at the close of the poem, this is what the poet says. I have made this shire and poem in order that it could clearly be seen how the ruler was served. So, kerja is the Malay word for that. Yeah. But its style is uncouth and rustic, and its verse is not sweet to the tongue. So that His Majesty might know as well as possible how his servants and slaves, meaning his war chiefs, yeah, have commanded their men, of each his service, whether good or bad, and of each how he has commanded has here been made known. So this again is about perintah, about commanding. The reason I have made this story known is in order that the courageous will rejoice. All who were here depicted as remiss in their service may perhaps find more courage on a future occasion. In other words, it is an example. Yeah. And it is a kind of reward also, because you hear yourself praised. Yeah. I have heard it and seen it. I have taken part in the action. All who were there, I have clearly seen. About all of them, I have truthfully told. Siamese, Malays, I have mentioned them all. And this mentioning is extremely important in the epic again. Because the way to die in history in the pre-literate period is not being mentioned. You have to be mentioned constantly. In every performance of an epic, your name has to be mentioned. Yeah, that's about as eternal alive as you can get in the times before scripts became very important, yeah, and written sources. And we are here in a tradition where the written source is still on the fringes. I give a little example of this pledge battle collocation, you could call, a promise, and then realizing that promise, or at least making a promise. In this case, I didn't have the space for the last one. The sample here is the courage, the bearing, and the heroic oath. And that is a description of Antonio Vaz Pinto, the commander of the Armada de Remus, so the galley fleet of Malacca, yeah, who has been sent to attack the Malays in the stronghold in Rojoh. I come to Rojoh later. And the admiral is, of course, the figure who is praised in the poem, yeah, the leader on the Malay side. When the admiral, that vizier who escorted them, heard that the Franks were about to attack Rojoh to take revenge, he gallantly anchored his big gurab amidst the enemy's galleys like a palisade. So you see, gallantly, of course. Yeah. Here, that's important. Their weapons in their hands and fully armed, all our men stood ready on the walls of the fort. So there was a fort at Rojoh, apparently. The admiral had said, if Rojoh is defeated, it will only be over our dead bodies. Okay. Yeah, so you see, here again, a statement of importance. Datuk Maharaja Dipati Kampar, one of the war chiefs, was an experienced warrior who knew how to attack. When he heard the words of the great vizier, which is the admiral, he swore an oath without delay. If the Franks attack, your servant will accompany you in battle, sir. From of old until now, the Franks have always been the enemy he has fought. Now, watch how the vizier reacts to these words. When the vizier heard his oath, he felt happy and at ease. The man had already demonstrated his courage. Whatever task he would be given, he could be relied upon. So you see how important the spoken word was for these people. Yeah. This was like signing a contract and having a guarantor too for the contract. Yeah. So it is a bit to bring over to you the Malay notion of heroic epic. And also the heroic epic was performed. In the old days, this kind of historiographical works were for performance. They were to be sung, yeah, for a public. And I take here a description by the former secretary of the last Sultan of Siak, a description which he put on paper in 1973. And it's as followed. It's also good to say clearly, it's a ritual of commemoration. You will wonder what that newfangled term means. Yeah, I will try to be commemoration. Okay, I'll first read the passage. For the occasion, several singers with a pleasing and tuneful voice were summoned to the palace to perform the Shire Prang Siak. So the Shire on the Siak was. Siak is a state on the east coast of Sumatra. The solemn atmosphere was permeated with the rhythms of the Shire, and the great variety of tunes to which it was sung aroused all sorts of feelings in those who listened. So it was a very emotional thing. Yeah. It's not like reading, yeah, which of course is your profession as historians. You read a history. No, this was performed and this was attended by lots of emotions. Yeah. And commemoration is actually a kind of Janus-based thing. There are two sides to it, an emotional one and a more intellectual one, you could say. If we go to the emotional one, it follows then. At moments of sadness during the performance, yeah, at moments of sadness, tears would flow freely and sad sobs would fill the hall. And the Malays have a word for that, kenang. Still now, yeah. If you talk about kenangan, that's fond memories of something which you don't have anymore. Yeah, dwelling on that. Yeah. And this kind of this moment of sadness you can compare to, let's say, what you have in Western heroic epic, the planctus, yeah? Plainte in French. Yeah? The planctus. So these are type scenes, typical scenes that keep recurring of heroes bending over the corpse of someone who has just died. Yeah? And saying, oh, please come back, don't go away, and so on and so on. Yeah. And in Malay too, we have these scenes that they're called ratap type scenes. Yeah. But when the Shire reached the moment of battle, its staunch rhythm would arouse a fighting spirit that would not be stilled. And then we get to the intellectual kind of reaction, yeah? Namely to take an example, to want to follow and to repeat that. Yeah. So that is the whole thing. It's commemoration means that you also want to repeat in your deeds the past. Yeah, you want to be a second Alexander the Great in as a general. Yeah. Okay, now I go to the historical background of my narrative, and later I'll give a very rough description of the narrative. Yeah. The historical background is as follows. When the Shire Prang Johor, the Shire about the wars of Johor begins, we are sometime in 1639. And in 1639, as you may remember, the Dutch had already occupied large parts of Portuguese India. Yeah. and were also encroaching on the Portuguese positions on Ceylon. And they were now all had to set their sights on Malacca because that was the great prize which they hoped to get. Yeah. And they tried every trick in the book with circus, sending ships, blocking the ports so that Malacca would surrender. When the narrative begins, both Aceh and Johor claim Pahang. Pahang is to the north of Johor as their dependency. Acehese fleets are plying between Aceh and its outpost in Kuala Pahang. Kuala means the river mouth. The Kuala Pahang is the mouth of the Pahang River. Yeah. Enforcing Iskandar Thanis, the second sultan of great sultan of Aceh, 1637 to 1641, enforcing Iskandar Thani's claim on Pahang against that of Johor. The Acehese presence and the on and off threat of Portuguese attacks make Johor an unsafe place for its king, for Abdul Jalil III. And Abdul Jalil is now staying, as the narrative begins, and we start in the middle of it because it's broken off. The first part of the text is missing. We have no idea how it starts. Yeah. So I may be totally wrong with whatever I say next about the story because of that. There's always that risk. But okay. It starts then with him, this sultan, staying at the court of Patani, where its queen Raja Kuning is reigning, who also bears the Thai title Prachau. And Prachau is some Thai word, a title which was conferred by the Thais on the Malay, the rulers of Patani in those days. And the interesting thing is he had married her possibly as early as 1623, when she may have been about 13 years old, according to some sources. But they had divorced probably by 1639. And the reason stated by Hikayat Patani, that is a Malay history of Patani, in rather ambiguous words, is that he was unable to do it with a woman. Okay, question is, was he homosexual? Or was it some other defect? But we shall not know. The text is not clear about this. His first marriage in 1612 is not unimportant because that was a marriage with a Pahang princess, whose half-brother, Raja Mughal, is the later Iskandar Thani. Yeah. So that's how Johor and Aceh both came to have these conflicting claims on Pahang. Yeah. I'm trying to explain. And Abdul Jalil reigned as Sultan of Pahang from 1630 until 1617, when he was with his family removed from Johor, yeah, by the Acehese and deported to Aceh. Abdul Jalil's viceroy, as Yang di-Pertuan Muda, must be a certain Raja Bajau, who was born somewhere in the early 1620s and died in 1673 or 1675. The sources disagree on that. Only son of Sultan Abdullah Ma'ayat Shah, who was an uncle of Abdul Jalil, the Johor Sultan. When Raja Bajau's father died in 1623, Raja Bajau was still far too young for the throne, and through the mediation of the admiral of our story, the great hero of our story, Abdul Majid, through his mediation, it was therefore agreed that in 1623, not Raja Bajau, who was too young, but Raja Bujang, the only son of Sultan Abdullah Ma'ayat Shah's half-brother Alauddin, would become the successor to the dead Sultan. So by about 1639, in his early 20s, Raja Bajau was, as also agreed in 1623, duly installed as Yang di-Pertuan Muda as Viceroy of Johor, so that he could succeed Sultan Abdul Jalil. In 1641, he was also nominated as Viceroy of Pahang by Sultan Abdul Jalil. And in about 1643 or 4, he married Raja Kuning. Now that is strange because, as I already told you, Abdul Jalil had been married to Raja Kuning, had then divorced, yeah, and then he married Raja Kuning. So that is rather an unusual thing. But he is not the son of the Sultan who had been married to her. So it's not the son marrying the wife, former wife of his father. Yeah, I'm just underlining that. There's no scandal there. Yeah. Raja Kuning was then in her 40s, so she must have been quite an attractive woman to get this relatively young chap. Yeah, but he was actually, I should say, he was simply looking for a power base. Yeah. And she died in 1688. She became quite old. And so Raja Baja went to Patani and there began to take charge of the kingdom, much to the chagrin of its nobles. And Raja Baja's Achinese followers in Patani, who had come with him from Pahang, where he had been viceroy, and then began to take sexual liberties. I'm now quoting from Hikayat Patani, yeah, with the daughters of the officials, and even worse, Raja Bajau himself, who had married the queen there, shifted his favors from his royal wife to a mere court singer, certain Dam Sirat. Yeah. Well, the results were, of course, not long in coming. Raja Bajau was thereupon chased out of Patani. We also get that confirmed by the company sources. Was chased out of Patani by its angry nobility, and many of his followers were slaughtered. Yeah. And there is considerable confusion about who is who, and I should not bother you with this because by now your head must be spinning, because this is Malay genealogy, and if there's anything the Malays are good at, love to do, it's spinning out genealogy. Yeah. So anyway, so there is some doubt whether that whether the young Pertuan Muda of Johor in the years we can say about 1639-40, who that was that a son of the reigning sultan? The answer is no. Was he a brother of the reigning sultan? No, he was none of that, because the reigning sultan had no son and he had no brother. Yeah, I shall not try to prove it here, but anyway. So there is no scandal, but what is certain is that my text is interesting in that it discreetly passes over all these shocking things that were meanwhile been happening in those years. They're not mentioned, of course. But then again, this is a heroic epic, and it's not the business of heroic epic to discuss that. Yeah. Let's go on. I now go to the structure of Syahrang Johor. How is the story structured? And as I discuss this structure, I will give more details about each of the three phases of that structure, because I say it's a tripartite structure. The first is to start in Patani, and which I have baptized, rightly or wrongly, the Admiral's Vow. Yeah. Assuming the legitimacy of Johor's claims on Pahang, yeah, the narrative of Syahrang Johor starts with the admiral declaring in front of his war chiefs that it is his wish to save Johor and restore its former glory. At the time, Johor was, of course, let's say, at a low point in its fortunes, yeah, because the king had left Johor for Patani, threatened by the Portuguese, threatened by Achinese fleets, and so this was a very difficult moment in the continuation of the dynasty, so to say. So the admiral at court stated his intention to do that, to save the kingdom and restore its former glory, upon which the king then orders him to take up command, it says in Malay, pergi memerintah, and confront the enemy. And the piquant thing is that this taking up command is not just, it seems, being, let's say, it gets a certain, it gets an atmosphere of royalty around being in command. And that is difficult because in the Malay kingdom, you can have only one ruler, and that's the ruler. You cannot have two kings. Yeah. And in a way, you have two kings because here you have a king, and say we say, if I may borrow a Dutch word, you have a stadhouder. Yeah. Who on his behalf is doing the commanding and leading the troops. At the nadir of Johor's fortunes, the kings must, we are now in a council at court, yeah, must be dissuaded by the admiral from pawning his costly royal ceremonial dress, because there was fortunes were invested in the royal ceremonial dresses. Yeah? And even that of his ceremonial dress of his viceroy. And why? Because, well, the king needed money, of course, for wars, and he thought to solve the problem in this way, but he was talked out of it by the admiral. Yeah. Who then even politely offers that he will pay for everything. So he was actually quite rich then. And in a way, it's a lack of modesty, I should almost say, to tell the king that you will pay for everything. There is something strange about this loyalty of the admiral. The king invests the admiral as a substitute king, granting him the right to display the symbols of royal status. I shall not explain to you what those symbols are, but say trumpets, certain parasols, stuff like that. Yeah. The admiral is also given something, and that is very interesting for this conference. Finally, I have something which is really directly up your street. Yeah. The admiral is also given a scroll, and that's the Arab word they used there is sigil. And a sigil is indeed a scroll of paper. But what was this scroll? Was it an official token of nomination, or a nomination to show, yes, I'm the admiral in command of the fleet, and you can see it here? Or was it something else? And I would say it was more likely something like standing orders. Yeah. And would therefore be something akin to the Portuguese regimento. Yeah, the Portuguese, when they went to Malacca to conquer it, they had the regimento from the king, yeah, which specifically stated what the commanders had to do there. Yeah. And I will come back to that sigil again later to show that the sigil may have played a role as a source of information for the writing of the text. And that is interesting, because that would mean we have one of the first signs I know of a Malay historian using a source deemed reliable in order to compose a historical narrative. Yeah. Okay, so much. He has been made stadhouder of Johor, yeah, by the Sultan, who stays behind in Patani, and he himself now sails to Rojoh on Bintan. Bintan we have seen on the map, but where is Rojoh? And you will not find it anywhere on those maps. In fact, when I asked Indonesian friends of mine in Riau, can you tell me where Rojoh is? Because I couldn't find it on any map in the beginning. I was looking in the wrong place because there are maps. They said, there's no Rojoh here, look elsewhere. So I had a problem there. Anyway, he sails to Rojoh on Bintan, and I will later tell you where it is. Carefully heeding his orders, the Orang Laut, his followers there, build a large war fleet. A brief word on the Orang Laut. The Orang Laut, sometimes not quite justly, they are called the sea gypsies of the Riau archipelago. They are people who live, who die and are born and live on boats and never come out of their boat. Yeah, they don't live on the land. And they served as the men who would man the fleets, build the fleets for Johor. And they were directly loyal to the admiral, because he was their supreme commander, but also beyond that, because of Malay notions of loyalty to the Sultan himself. They were, so to say, the Sultan's by being descendants from Malacca, were, so to say, the ones who had power over the Orang Laut. Yeah. If they would have been not descendants of the sultans of Malacca of old, the Johari sultans, the Orang Laut too would not have felt the same loyalty. Okay, now where is Rojoh? If we go to the Sejarah Melayu, the history of the Malay kings, we learn that at least in one text, I haven't found it in all variants, and there are many variants of the Sejarah Melayu. There's only one manuscript in which you find the name Rojoh. Yeah? And according to that, in that text, it was built on Bintan by Hang Tuah's son. Hang Tuah was the admiral of the last reigning sultan of Malacca. Yeah. By Hang Tuah's son Hang Nadim, who became the admiral of the first sultan of Johor. Yeah. It was built on Bintan by Hang Nadim as a bustling capital and harbor for Johor's first sultan Alauddin. But again, the Sejarah Melayu does not say where on Bintan. And Bintan is not a very big island, it's about 3 times Singapore, but but still, you would like to know more. And helpfully, that is the book by on the Malay Peninsula by Begbie, Scotsman, who says that Rojoh is located in the southern part of western Bintan. And if you go to the maps, it becomes clear that it is situated on the modern Sungai Raja. So apparently Rojoh and Raja are the same word. Yeah. And that Rojoh must be the Orang Laut pronunciation of Raja. Well, here you can more or less see it. This is Rojoh. Here someone has written this was made by a Dutch traveler about 1900, who visited the area here, and in pencil wrote Rojoh Besar, the great Rojoh. And so Rojoh is a river name. And here is also written less easy to read, Rojoh Kecil, small Rojoh, which is apparently a small rivulet running parallel to that one. Yeah. So this is the western part of Bintan, and this is later Riau, where in the 18th century, Johor and its kings had their royal residences. I go on, and here you see, this is a map made of by someone who had the task to map the Orang Laut communities in the area. And here you see that place Raja. So this is Rojoh here, what is here called Raja, and this Tanjung Raja. Yeah. And as you see, it was an Orang Laut community. So this was a community where those faithful followers of the admiral and of the ruler, among others, had a big community. And then I go to a more modern map. We are now in 1929, the colonial Dutch map from that year. And here you see the Sungai Raja entering, and here you see a kind of inner lake almost, with a number of islands. They are actually a bit more close to this side if you look at Google Maps. And the whole thing is surrounded, certainly in those days, was surrounded by mangroves. So extremely difficult to approach overland. Yeah. Moreover, easy to defend when you want to get in, because if you build a fort here and you place a few cannon, nobody can come in. Yeah. And if you then have your fleet somewhere here, it's safe for the attackers, and it can still shoot back. Yeah. Moreover, as you see here, this is all mud flats. Again, not a place where you want to land your soldiers. Yeah. Because if they step 1 meter out of their ship, they're up to their neck in the mud, especially with their weaponry on. Yeah. So this is Rojo here, where the admiral built his base for the actions which then took place in the Shire Prang Johor. Yeah. Here you see the same place from the air with what is it? With Google Earth, and it is the place that is now called Busung, at least on this side, and there's a bridge here, and there must have also been a bridge in those days at the same place. And here you see the islands, and my suspicion is that one of these islands served as the royal residence. Yeah, this was optimally protected. Okay, so much for that. Let's then go on to the rest of the narrative. That narrative geographically moves from Riau to Aceh, and then through the Malacca Straits. And it tells basically of a number of campaigns by the admiral, and you could roughly divide it into 9 episodes. Of course, things aren't as orderly as I make them, but I make them a bit orderly in order to make life easier for us. First, the battle with the Achenese at Simpang. The admiral's attempt to intercept a Pahang-bound Achenese fleet is here described at an island called Merambong. That island is famous because Heredia mentioned it as Ilha das Cobras. It's the entrance to the western entrance of the, how do you call it, Tubrau Strait. Yeah. They try to intercept the Achenese there, but then they sail off into the western entrance to Tubrau Strait, so that the Johorese now have to hurry around southern Singapore to the eastern entrance of Selat Tubrau Strait, and then entering in at an island near the Simpang River, opposite present town of Pasir Kudang in Johor. They lie hidden, awaiting the enemy, and the battle then ensues. But because the text is sometimes fragmentary, here is again a lacuna, so we don't know how the battle ended. But apparently badly, because the Achenese were very angry about being attacked by Johor. That much we know. The second then is the admiral's meeting with Philip Lucas, who came from Ceylon. The admiral at Karimun is received by a Gubernur, Philip Lucas, and we can date that to 1639, October 1639, and is received with great respect, seated as if on a throne. Well, that is a nice one. He is seated as if on a throne. So here again, we see the text giving royal status to the man in a way which rather exceeds normal practice in Malay text. Yeah. The Gubernur tells him Aceh's king has promised to pay him his weight in gold to the Dutch if they will only hand him over to him. And the Dutch then wonder if the king may be losing it, since he is acting like a eunuch. Now, this is a Johorese joke, yeah, from the 17th century. Because Aceh was the only court in the Malay world and the Rizé of the Malay world because they had eunuchs. Yeah. Funny thing. Yeah, they were not real men. Yeah, and this Achenese king also was not a real man because he didn't come to fight himself. No, yeah, he wanted the Dutch to arrest their enemy. Okay. That is the next episode. The third one is an inconclusive battle with an Achenese fleet at a place I have not been able to determine, but which is, I think, on the southwestern side of the island of Bulang. The Pahang-bound Achenese fleet. I cannot make that. Okay. 9 episodes. This one I managed to find. This is interesting because indeed, this is the Simpang place. This is the island where the battle took place in the Tubrau Strait. And this is an almost modern map. This is 1905. a map of Singapore. Yeah, so I have been able to locate that. Yeah, I'll just continue. And then we get an attack by the Johorese fleet on Mua and Batu Pahat, that is in the Malacca Strait. And there comes the remark, yeah, I'm almost there. Yeah, okay. They attack first the Portuguese at Mua and Batu Pahat, and then the Portuguese, in revenge, send a fleet to East Sumatra, to Johor's dependency at Bengkalis, which they indeed managed to destroy. And to drive the Portuguese away from the Bengkalis, the admiral sends from Rochow his son, Sri Bijadiraja, with 40 ships, according to the sea deal, it says in my text. Okay, meaning 40 ships apparently to the regimento of the commanders that are still preserved. That's how I interpret this remark. So here we have indeed a rare reference to a written source for the compilation of a Malay text. In a Malay historical tradition that starts somewhere in the 1860s, yeah, the Tuhfat al-Nafis, there you find the first references and criticism of historical sources, written ones. And then, of course, we get a tit for tat between Malacca and Johor, which ends with the Portuguese destroying Johor's fleet in Rochow. And that is, of course, Antonio Vaz Pinto, who then comes and rows up the Sungai Raja, which I've shown you on the map, but is surprised because the fleet that had been sent out by Johor exactly at that moment returns, so that he is then between two forces. And a battle takes place in an area called Laut Pidai, the sea of the sea snakes, and I think it's that inner lake on the map. And there the entire fleet of Johor is destroyed. And what is especially important is there were a lot of cannon conquered by Malacca, and they were taken to Malacca. And later, Johor wanted to have those cannon back, of course. But okay, I'm going to make it very short. In the 7th episode, we get a quarrel between Achinese and Johorese on a meeting which takes place far away, actually, from all these real battles, namely, if I have located it rightly, at Torre, that is in the Sintil Regency, southwest Aceh. Yeah, so it's on the fringes of the Achinese, let's say, area, Achinese influence area. On the Dutch ship, the Achinese admiral and a Johorese war chief get into a heated quarrel over Johor's attack on the Pahang fleets. When they want to fight it out then and there, their host tells them to do so elsewhere. And they do so elsewhere indeed, because they organize a boxing match at Baturantai on the beach. That is funny. They don't kill each other, no, they box. Yeah, and then peacefully sail away again. This is kind of warfare which we are not fighting Ukraine, that is clear. If only we could have Zelensky versus Putin, I'm afraid Putin would suffer a lot. Anyway, it all ends with another battle, and this, of course, reflects this story here, reflects the efforts the Dutch took in order to keep the two parties from fighting with each other, because they wanted to have both as their allies against Malacca. Yeah. Well, I only go to the last one then, which tells how only thanks to Johor's help the Dutch managed to conquer Malacca, because they were already getting ready to go away because of disease among their ranks at Malacca during the siege, when the Johorese persuaded them not to do so. Well, if that's really the case, we don't know. And I think the whole story ultimately smacks of let's say, damage control. Yeah, because in fact the Johorese played no part in scaling the walls. They only had been hired by the Dutch to make noise outside the walls. They were not given an honorable military role, and that is because the Dutch did not confide in the military qualities of the Johorese fighters. They didn't have the kind of military reform and notions of how to fight a battle, which the Dutch had by those days. Yeah. And also, we get a very negative portrait of the last commander, who conquers ultimately Malacca, the Dutch commander, because that Dutch commander hadn't kept the promise by his previous predecessors that he would give the cannon conquered by the Portuguese at Rocho and taken to Malacca, would give those to Johor when Malacca would fall. They failed to keep their promise, and they made it even worse by giving some cannon to the Achinese. That really made the Johorese angry. We know that again from a translated letter from the admiral later to Batavia. Well, after that we get the triumphal return, and now I go to some. Well, we're almost there. Why the extremely negative portrait of the last Dutch commander? It comes, I think, from Johor's desire to take it, albeit poetical, revenge for being slighted by the Dutch, which appears from a letter of protest sent by the admiral to Antonio van Diemen and Rade in 1641, October 1641. Namely, Minna had refused to give Johor's war chiefs the role of storming Malacca, only giving the task of luring the Portuguese defenders away from where the Dutch attacked by making noises. He had also failed to keep Trooper's promise to Sriwijaya to hand over to Johor all the cannon the Portuguese had conquered at Rocho. And even worse, in 1641, February 1641, when the Johorese Sultan was still in Patani, he had to be brought back safely to his residence in Johor. Yeah. And the new governor of Malacca, the Dutch governor of Malacca, Van Twist, had refused a Johorese request to have 2 Dutch yachts escorting the king back from Patani to Batu Sala. So relations were very bad. Yeah. So that is really a matter of damage control, and I'm not going to talk about how that damage control worked now, but it will be clear to you. I now go to the question of what to do with all this as a source, of course. We have already seen, those of you who have read this excellent study by Cyril Skinner of 1963 about another heroic epic, Syekh Makassar, poem of the Makassar War of 1669-70. He there criticized Malay heroic poetry as interest only in personalities, military incidents, councils, court camels, and no interest in the economic, tactical, and strategic factors underlying the war. He also missed scepticism, objectivity, exactness in numbers, and little to describe what really happened in an objective way. Yeah, in fact, we shall never know, I'm afraid, because we're not there. If we only stop at searching for a Rankian reconstruction of how it was once long ago, we fail to attend to what the genre accomplishes. On the upside of the heroic epic as a source, we get, of course, the rare local perspectives. While roaming the wide water world of Rio with the Admiral, we hear of places and names that in European sources usually remain under the radar. Here no mention of Pedra Branca or the three brothers, the Drie Gebroeders, which is a name for a number of islands, but Morambong, Sepang, Simpang. But what we miss sorely, of course, I should say, is descriptions of landscape. Malay texts usually do not describe landscape, nothing. Yeah. We are also given an inside view into the networks of the Orang Kaya, so the powerful people of Johor. And we can find there a lot of genealogical information because in that society, your worth was how you were born, worth was birth. Yeah. But we get no individual portraits, as we would see, for instance, in Dutch sources of the time. Yeah. So, well, that much is the rather disorganized retreat which I organize now for my text. And I thank you for your attention. Sorry for taking the time. Shall I?
Yes, yes, please.
Yes.
Just for me. I will give you yours.
Okay, I'll just take it with me.
Okay. Thank you. Now let's share this. Thank you. Well, for me, this was some sort of rights head revisited Malay genealogies and old times when I was a young student, and nothing of this confusion was confused in my mind. Okay, let's open the debate for a while. Firstly, hear the people in the room, and then I will wait for any people here in the Zoom. Please raise your hand to pose any question. And also, I will take a look at the YouTube to see if there are any questions. Okay, please. Anyone here at the room? Let me now put here the camera to you. Okay.
I would just want to know if the two sources give you the place, the native place of the Chinese mentioned in your sources. You have the native place.
Sorry, is that a question for me?
Yes, I want to know.
Well, I couldn't hear it clearly, so I couldn't respond to that.
I just want to know if in your in these sources we can also find the native place of the Chinese that you find it. I mean, they came from Zhangzhou, Quanzhou, or I don't know.
Oh, it's no. Only what I have is only the name and the house lot. So the way I studied is I cross-check with other sources, then I could find out something a little more about this name. But well, there is no one. After cross-check, then I may have a chance to locate where this guy was born. For example, there is one person who is hired by the Dutch as interpreter. So in the other sources will record his name and where he came from. And this guy happened to be born in Manila at Tonto. He was born in Tonto and is a mestizo. So only after we cross-check with this person, by chance, we could know where he was born. Yeah, and that's my answer.
Many thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone here, Paulina?
I also have a question for, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce well your name. Weijo?
Yeah.
Weijo? Yeah, this.
Nice.
Thank you. You mentioned that some of the owners of the town were probably rich refugees. What do you mean by refugee? And my second question is that on the slide number 5, there was an image of a plant, maybe it was the tea plant. I wanted to ask you if, besides the tea, if there were any other plants that were commercialized between China, Manila, Japan, or Cambodia. And these are my 2 questions.
Sorry, could you repeat the second question? I couldn't
Plants,
understand.
P-L-A-N-T, plants, that if besides the tea, if there were any other
besides the tea.
plants to be commercialized.
Oh, you mean okay. Oh, you mean this cultivations. Okay, the second question is about the plants, whether they,
Plants,
did the road.
trees,
I
can you
did
write
the
it
road.
down so he can?
They bring the tea leaves, but they didn't bring this the tea trees to Taiwan at the time. But we know clearly that at the time, this Chinese citizens there, they drink tea occasionally, and also the low-ranking Dutch officials, they also use the tea in daily basis. So that's my answer for the tea. And for the other plants, well, that's a time. There's all kind of plant circulated globally, and some of these cultivations were like those plants from the America has been brought by the Iberians to maybe to China or Southeast Asia long before the Dutch arrived. But there's one plant, vegetable, the cabbage. The cabbage may be brought by the Dutch. It is recorded in Chinese sources say that the cabbage was brought from Java, and it is recorded by the Dutch that the Dutch will grow cabbage in their garrisons, like in Cape Town, in Batavia, they all grow the cabbage, and so in Taiwan they were provided with cabbages. So it is reasonable that Dutch had grown cabbages in Taiwan. Yeah, and for other plants, and we need more research about it, because there were some Chinese sources mentioned also some other kind of vegetables, but before I found this, before I cross-check it and find solid evidence, I will feel quite skeptical about that. Yeah. And what is the first question?
About the refugees. What do you mean by refugees?
Right. Because when now you see the house register is made in 1643, right? In 1644, that was the time the Manchus invaded China. So at about 1647, there were several thousand refugees come from China to this Zelandia town suddenly, just because the Hokkien, the province Hokkien, become a battlefront at the time, at 46 and 47. They come here, take a refugee for a while, then they're back to China. And some part amount of them stay, but large amount of them come, then hide a while, then go back. Then later they have this, they see this land could be cultivated, and they see that this land is is equipped with well administration under the Dutch. So they see the opportunity to invest. So later there were waves of immigrants really immigrate to Taiwan, and they began to grow more and more rice. They cultivate the paddy field because the Dutch only they appreciate the cash corporal, that's the sugar. They like to have rice, but that's not their first priority. But for the refugees, they will think the paddy field, the rice is most important, and it is create a kind of preposition or a kind of a condition that allow them to take a refugee again if the things happen again, if some chaos still continues in the mainland. So so I say that they were part of them at 46 and 47 may have the background of the refugees, because there's a huge turbulence in the mainland China. There's a dynasty change from Ming to Qing. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now, but I have some hands left here in our guest. Please, Harriet, you were the first one to raise your hand.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Good.
Got
Excuse me. Wait, I have a question also for Wei Chung. When, and this gets back to the question from somebody earlier, with regard to the identity of the Chinese who went to Taiwan, you mentioned, I understand, that you had problems identifying their origins. Is that correct? Am I correct? Yes?
No,
Okay.
you're correct, because there's a 105 names and only 31 person. After cross check, we have a little more information than their names. That's why that it is very difficult to locate their origins. We have their other qualities, like where did they trade, what kind of business they involve, maybe sometimes reveal what kind of language they use. And only there's one exceptional cases that because this guy works for the Dutch, and when at the time the Dutch record where he was originated, that is the Manila mestizo I mentioned to you just before.
Right.
Yeah.
I would like to make a suggestion to, perhaps this will help you. Have you tried the Geographical Information Systems Index that Harvard has produced? As I understand now, the biographical dictionary has several 100,000 names. And if you type in Fujian, and then you go down by counties, by Xian, and you start counting villages, you'll get some information, I believe, because these people did not go to Taiwan as individuals. They went with their guangxi, with their native village connections, and that was always the way the Fujian traders did their business. So I would suggest you start accessing the database. It's free, and it's full of information about emigrating Chinese from the Song onwards. So maybe that will help you.
That's a very nice suggestions, and I think if there is any opportunity to cross-check any helpful documents or database, then I shall try it. There's no problem that I will try to cross-check this database. Yes. Okay, and then the other thing I wanted to ask, but this is more of a long distance question. Is there a way that you can
relate your work, your discoveries, what you are doing now, to what Tonio Andrade did in his book, How Taiwan Became Chinese. Because there seems to me so much interesting research going on, but people are not linking from what other people have done in the past to what we're doing now for the future. And there's always missing a narrative. And I'm very interested to hear more about how what you have done and your fabulous research could fit into this narrative that we worked with before. I mean, it's only a suggestion. It's not, anything more than that. But I think it makes our work more interesting for other people. That's all.
Yeah. I'm thinking about it. From his book, there's, I think, one chapter he mentioned is Chinese as the only bee for this colony. He did have a chapter especially discuss about the Chinese. And that's a general situation. I think if I were writing a general introduction for these documents, and I will took gradually from Anthony Andrade's book.
Because he talks about,
explain.
you're right, he talks about co-colonization, which is a very interesting concept.
Yes. In my presentation, I also mentioned about this later, the Dutch trying to either lure or pushing those people involved more into, like what you say, into this co-colonized system. It is true. So the research result is quite, you can say just correspond to Tonio Andrade's study.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Ubaldo is the next. Hello, Ubaldo. Back in Italy.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a question for Weitong. So first of all, thank you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting. And this document, I think it's very interesting. I was wondering, since I found in the Manila's customs records, some ships were coming from Cambodia and Vietnam. So probably they were moving from China, but what do you think? They were moving from Taiwan to Cambodia and then they went to Manila, passing through Borneo? I mean, what they were selling in Manila? I mean, what was the use of what they were buying in Cambodia and bringing to Manila? This is just a curiosity. Then I have a question about the documents you examined. I was wondering, the Chinese owner of the houses in Tainan, they were just owning one place or more than one house? Those were shops. They were renting this place to someone else, like in Manila, or what were they doing there? And then related to that, I was wondering about those green parts. There are names. The owner is shown the names of people who have those you highlighted in green color. Those houses for which we have names, but at the same time, probably it's not specified that they're Chinese, I guess. I don't know why I'm asking you. And as far as I understood, you worked on the genealogies of Fujian and Taiwan, but you couldn't find much information about the identity of these people, right? Thank you so much.
Okay, so now I begin to answer the questions. So this is for first about this the trade between Cambodia and Manila, right? But actually, I do not know. What I know is they did travel to Cambodia or Cochinchina, and they might speak Iberian, so they speak Spanish. So I think that they might have chances to flow to Manila and some other Iberian cities, but I don't have any solid information about what kind of trade they were conduct. They proceed. They did there. I have no idea. And then there's about the owner and the usage of the house. I think there are multiple functions. But then first, let's go back to the source itself. It is, well, suppose if we have a very neat documents preserved by the Dutch side, then there should be maybe in each year they had one household register, but such set of document is not preserved. The only thing we have is accidentally preserved there and survived to now. So that was happened to be almost the first or the second time the Dutch began to do this survey. So when they start to survey, at the same time, they're trying to make a design and trying to adjust all these perhaps houses built by the willingly and to more neat bases. So this is why they have recorded lots of names with the Chinese owners and some names with the Dutch owners, but a lot of place actually is empty house lot. That is the Dutch saying that, oh, there's empty places, but now I'm going to regulate it. I'm going to send an order, an instruction, and tell everyone that's not the empty site, that's a site maybe going to be sold. And also because the document itself is accidentally preserved, so it's probably not the real official one, but a copy kept by the negotiator, the whole himself. So it's not a completed and proved, well-did document. It's more like a manuscript just preserved for himself as one of the recorder or the surveyor to do this record. This is why there were so many green places that either they were empty or, well, they have a name upon that, but it's too difficult to say that's a European name or that's a Chinese name. Yeah, but mostly they are empty. That's the second question, right? And the third one is, but what is the third question? Sorry.
The third question is just about the genealogy. How much information you're able to find? I mean, how many names? Because you said there were very scattered information. I was wondering.
The real difficulty. The real difficulty here is the Chinese have multiple names. Chinese has a birth name. When they grow up, they will have a name signed by perhaps the teacher in their household, perhaps some elder, intelligent peoples. If they have the lucky of honor, then they get the other names. And they have nicknames. And the problem is that those names in the records, it is very hard to say whether they were the birth names or they were the name given later when they grow up, or it's just a nickname given by their friends or given by the Dutch. So we got to consider all kinds of possibilities. So you got the genealogical records. It has not a lot of information, only your birth parents and your child and where you pass away and where you were you get birth, and it has your birth name, sometimes with your other name, sometimes not. Usually, it will not record your nickname. But the problem is in the Dutch record is that most of the, or we could image the daily practice of those merchants. They don't want people to know their birth names. They mostly use a nickname to call each other, and they use their nickname to put on the record for the Dutch, because the Dutch, what they owe for the Dutch is only the tax. When the Dutch comes, they could identify who they are and they could pay the tax. Then the business with the Dutch is over. So it's make it very difficult to identify who the guide is. Even with these 31 names, we know a little more their activities in the history, but still it's very hard to identify their name with like those names in the family records, in the genealogies records. And so the thing is, we could find the names pronunciated quite similarly. But apart from that, we need one more evidence. For example, if there's a evidence in the Dutch record show this guy passed away in, say, Cambodia, and in Chinese genealogy also say this guy passed away in
Ja, was ist denn das für Schwarz?
Cambodia. Then we could be really sure we identified that one person. Yeah, it's almost to find a needle in a hay. Even if we have so many names.
Dobra. Tak.
Okay, Birgit, the floor is yours. Your microphone was already yours a few minutes ago.
Then you may have been hearing what was going on here, shockingly. Well, sorry for that, but thanks for the two excellent presentations. I also have a question for Wei Jung. And I do understand that it's not your primary interest, but I was wondering, does your source say anything about the Aboriginal population? And would it even be possible that some of the names that you can identify that they are not Chinese and not Dutch and not Mestizo, but some members of some indigenous tribe?
Yeah, but well, even if there are, just like I've mentioned, there are green parts, either they're empty or the name is too difficult to identify whether they're European or Chinese. They might be Aborigines, but they might also use Malay names. That's what I see, because, well, in the early period, in the 1620s, the interpreters, some of interpreters, they use the Malay language because in China they accept it. In China, it's easier to find the Malay interpreters. So then Dutch hired also Malay interpreters to when they were communicate with Chinese. So, and it will not show upon the records. They might be recorded as Chinese and they might be not. So I was thinking those names cannot identify, they might be a lot of possibilities. But for Aborigines, really they, well, it's hard to say because there's as far as I know, there's no desire of Aborigines to really, let's say, to be involved into this trading world. They were much more satisfied to stay in their tribes, and they could get all those groceries, those necessities from these tax farmers, from the Chinese merchants, and from every aspect, they were living, maybe their life standard is better than those people stay in this. In the beginning, it is a it is not a very magnificent town. It's only built from the earth. Everywhere maybe is dirty and unclean, and maybe they're diseased from this somewhere abroad. So, well, and also from the other aspect that all those names, you hardly find the women as owner of the house. So this is all something goes back to the survey, and something goes back to the to who will be able to own a plot of land. Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. I'm sorry. Any questions here on the room? I think there is more, one or two. Guillaume or Paula?
I mean, that completely related to your topic today, but I'm very blessed about now and education, and I want to know if this kind of literature that you use, in literature or you can find a lot of information about this population.
About the population.
Around out.
Oh, the oriental. Well, the oriental obviously play an important part in this story, but they are, of course, they're not in the higher echelon, they are not the leaders. They simply, they do the building of the ships, they do the rowing or the sailing of the ships, and that's it. And they are, of course, very important as spies. They were used mainly because they have knowledge of the intricate waterways of the earth. But therefore, the ideal means to do the task on ships coming and going and knowing what is going on in the area. So they were very important.
And so we have information about, I mean, the social organization of that.
Yes, there are studies, there's an excellent study about it, and this lady is a job, I think it's in the morning. That's very good. About specifically the figures more.
But not in this literature.
No. But they were very important because when in 1699, the last scion of the Malacca line of Sultans was murdered, and when he was being carried into the mosque, the next dynasty who was brought into the throne was the Trata-se, the prime minister who took over power and declared himself Sultan with the cooperation of the nobles. But his position remained very weak because he was not the guy of the line. And in, I think it was at 17 or something, when Red Columnaria from Siak attacked Johor. Johor was defenseless because the Oriental refused to fight for this Trata-se upside. Yeah. So yes, they were very important, but subsequently they completely disappeared as an important factor and lose their coherence as a group. Before that, they had an enormous status in Europe, and they lose that position after the murder of the Sultan, 1619.
Yes. The Portuguese called Saladas. Okay, Paulina, you had a.
Yeah, I have some questions for Professor Coaster. In the epic, there are many names or concepts or titles like, well, the Sultan, we all know what is the Sultan, but then the Raja, the Maraja in Spanish. So all of them are titles that refer to what tradition. Then my next question is related to what Paula has just asked about the plural clouds. Are they referred to the Bajals in the southern part of the
Yes, I see all the pirates.
In the Spanish sources, they are hybrids, of course.
Yeah.
But is it the same name for Belgium?
Yes. These part of the, I think we are supposed to be Bajau area. But I think that it shades into the Philippines, southern Philippines. So more to the east and more to the north. So that's Bajau, and this particular area, Bajau is called the Bajau presumably because for a while the royal house of Johor was exiled and avoiding dangerous Aceh fleets, they were there in Pambelan, the island group of Pambelan, and that is in the border. On the far eastern side of what is still before the outer side. Yeah.
And the first question for the different
Yes.
positions,
Yeah.
Maharaja, Raja,
The titles,
they are titled.
well, yeah, titles, they are titles indicative of court positions. Court positions, yeah, they are not necessarily titles indicating that you are, that like you're in the account of this or that, and you therefore have this or that land is completely subject to you. All the people living on that land have to work for you. It's not like that. It was, of course, by court title that could be given and could be withdrawn, but then it could be passed on to the family. Yeah. So you have like an admiral, besides the admiral, you have, for instance, the chief of police in the kingdom, the minister of police, you have to move, Laksamana, the admiral, this Laksamana was specifically have, let's say, have a base in terms of following in Vietnam, which is why he was a very suitable person to build his base in Vietnam, because there most of the people would be. But they are wartime.
I had a message, I don't remember.
No, we are on finishing our schedule. I would like also to just to say something about this. As I told you, this remind me of my previous research about the Malay state and about Johor, and Malacca, Johor, and Aceh was my master's thesis, and so for so long. I would have lots of questions about this, but just two details. The first one is about precisely the role of the Laksamana and the Bendahara. As far as I know, in this source, the Laksamana is the hero, and so it gives some emphasis on the sea power of the Sultanate, I think, I presume. But the old role of the so-called prime minister, the Bendahara, was it in a more obscure role at these days or not? And how does it fit with the young part one? I think it's, I don't know, what does it mean exactly? The only mention that I have about the young part one was that rivalry in Johor, that division in the early 17th century when the Matalif was there, and there was in the 1606, for instance, the Portuguese say that there are two sultans in Johor. And when we confront the Portuguese with the Dutch sources, we see that one of them was the younger brother of the Sultan. And it's called Young Dipatuan. It's some sort of the substitute of the Sultan of the Viceroy.
Yeah, so that is so to say that the connecting waiting after the Sultan dies. Yeah. The person who is waiting for the moment when the Sultan dies to become Sultan. The successor. That is the young Tuan means who he is addressed as Tuan, as Lord. Yeah, and that is a title which can be used for the Sultan as well. Yang Tuan Muda means the junior Yang Tuan. But according to this Bendahara and Laksamana, that is indeed a very important thing in the course of the 17th century. In fact, Daya indicates that in the history of Johor, because already by the 1620s, the Laksamana, he was then Bendahara. And subsequently, he was Laksamana, and he started, his son, sorry, started later to completely undermine the position of the Bendahara. That is after the fall of Malacca. And he started, the Bendahara was in control of the entire court, so to say. He managed the court for the Sultan. And the Laksamana was an important person, no doubt, and he had the military might of the kingdom, but still he was subject to the Bendahara initially. Yeah, and he gradually, in the 1650s, 60s, 70s, undermined the position of Bendahara, making himself the most important, which is why I think that it may well be that my text with the Laksamana giving himself royal heirs, or being given royal heirs, may be a rather late reduction. May come from the 1670s, perhaps even the beginning of the 1680s, just before the dead Laksamana, it was then from Paduka Raja, was killed. He was murdered. But that is okay. So that is another thing.
Yes, we have a final question. Yes, please.
I do have a question for you about because if you look, for example, into Spanish sources from the Philippines, those are more literature sources. They always struggle about building identities from the Flemish, from the Portuguese, local cultures. Exactly. And then in your poem, do you find also this drive to build or to talk about the others, the Flemish, the Portuguese, the Spaniards, or the different identities from the Eastern Asian world? Yeah. And what is the other?
Yeah, I get the point that identity is not a problem because in Malaysia, and the outside forces have a hard time being noticed. I mean, not in practical terms. Of course, in Malaysia, the Dutch have excellent worship and guns, and it was nice to have the Dutch as allies. Yeah. So a lot of kings try to get contracts with the Dutch. But at the same time, they resented those very contracts because it was with the movement, because the Dutch had their demands. Yeah. But yeah, the Dutch tend not really to be seen as a problem for them. They're not a threat to their identity. They're at most a practical problem which you have to handle in order that the kingdom doesn't inflame or doesn't say it wants to have political affairs. But it's not a matter of identity. I don't think so. So in that sense, if I understand it correctly, your sources are not good. Yeah. And apparently the presence was different. So, maybe because if I think in terms of the Spanish, there must have been a lot of mission which activity going on. And that meant indeed that they were asking your soul. That threatens your identity. And the Malays, no, just stay at home in their ideology and identity, their values, rather stable until the 19th century. Then, yes, then identity becomes more of a problem. But that's the 19th century.
Okay, I have after the last question, Maluka, please.
Yes, this is also for région. Actually, it's mainly a clarification I probably didn't get the information when you said it, but I would like to know your registers, how many do you have? And they go from, are they just on 1643 or do they go up to 1647? I didn't quite get this information, so I'm not quite clear about that. And then there's a quick question that you can answer very easily at Clark, yes, and it's a follow-up on what Valdo said. In those registers about the buildings, do you have information on how transactions were made? Do you have prices? Do you have issues on what type of transactions they were? So that's kind of the question I would like to.
Wait, hello? So, is my voice okay, right? Did you hear?
Yes.
My voice? Okay, yeah. Then I'm trying to explain that this document, firstly, we don't have nowadays in the company's archives, we do not have, or they do not, the company did not preserve the archives in the local level. So this register is an archive in local level, but during the war, the Dutch was kicked out by the Kozinka, later a Chinese warlord. Therefore, those local archives is not preserved. And this document is one of the kind survived by accidentally. So it is not the Dutch want to preserve it, it is preserved by chances. So we know that they supposed to have a set of such kind of records because we know the Dutch was extracting the taxes according to this kind of records. And what we have now is we have only the number of how much amount of the tax they collect. Like if you transact the house, then you will have to give certain amount of tax to the authorities. So we have the number, but we do not have the original archive in the local labor archive. Well, this is why, although this is this document record 300 houses, but it's only for that year, that is 1643. It should be the very first beginning of this registration. All of the other registration or all of the transaction record of the individual houses is not exist, at least as far as we know now. So this is only one accidentally preserved. Yeah, also, yeah, is it just one question or two questions?
That's fine, that's fine.
Yeah.
You answered everything.
Yes.
Okay. No last drinks. So I think, well, we have fulfilled all of the session. It's now 20 to 1 p.m. I think we are suspending now the works. We will be back at 2:30 Lisbon hour. So thank you for attending. Also for some people who are watching this session by YouTube. And so we will be back in well at more or less 2 hours into 2:30. Okay, thank you.